I got to get back into my welcome back to Beyond the Silence podcast.
Yeah, I'm your host, Lisa Toma.
Because last time I said I'm your guest.
I think I saw that. I think I saw that.
All right, so Lisa, when you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's fire it off.
Welcome back to Beyond the Silence podcast, and I am your host, Lisa Toma. So today we have a very special guest. I brought my friend Tammy, who I met through, originally, actually, we met through this mindset call that we were on, the wake up call. And then our paths kind of led through so many different people, which it's always so bizarre, but kind of always happens that way. So, with that being said, I would like to introduce you to Tammy. Tammy, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you on here. So, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited and a little bit nervous,
Of course.
but I think it's going to be really great.
Amazing. So I asked Tammy to be here today because we went for a coffee and we were kind of like talking. We didn't even realize how many synchronicities there were, and I really feel like your story will resonate with so many people as it did me. And I remember when I left you at Starbucks, I got in the car, and it's like those moments where you feel like you've healed from so many different things, or at least you're trying your best to. And then you have a conversation with somebody who shared their story with you, which is actually the whole reason why I started this podcast to begin with. And I got in the car, and so many things came up for me that I realized that maybe I didn't go deep enough when I was on my healing journey. And I just bawled my eyes out. And it was like a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And so many beautiful things came from that moment. So I was so excited to have you on because of the impact you just made on me that day. I knew it needed to be shared with
Yeah.
everyone.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
It makes my heart just race, just know. So first, I would love to just share with you that you're always doing enough, right? Like you
Yeah.
did just say I didn't go deep enough, but I
Right.
believe that I really believe that our bodies and our nervous system, and you already know this,
Yeah.
right? Like we acclimate and we kind of get to things. And so, one of the biggest lessons for me on this healing journey, and I'll get to that, is that I originally believed that I would get to a day and it would be over
Right.
and I would be healed
Right.
and that would be everything.
Yeah.
And then I would start to get frustrated because that wasn't happening.
Yeah. You felt like you were staying stuck.
Sure.
I
Was
went through that
failing,
too.
right? It
Right.
was so frustrating. And then I started to realize, I was like, well, wait a second. I'm definitely not the person I was back then.
Right.
I can handle this. My nervous system is opening up and able to handle more things. And so it was such a beautiful realization
I love
that
that.
the healing journey is forever,
Definitely.
right? There's not just one absolute day where it's over and you never have to think about whatever it was that you went through.
Right. And I couldn't agree more. And I feel like as you start creating your own life, you start creating your own safety too that you didn't receive,
Yeah.
which is like one of the big reasons why your nervous system starts softening a little bit because you start creating those moments of safety because you are in control of your life now and you're creating the environment that you
Yeah.
always wanted, right? So with that being said, maybe let's go back and let's talk about maybe your first experience that kind of took that safety from you. And yeah, we'll just go from there.
Yeah. Do you think we need to put a trigger warning or anything here?
So before you share your story, I just wanted to kind of give the listeners and the viewers a little bit of kind of like a trigger warning. We will be talking about childhood sexual abuse. So if this is something that's very sensitive, I do highly recommend that you take very good care of yourself and give yourself the time that you need to process everything that you're listening to, and really like tapping in, seeing what you need. If this is something that you don't feel that maybe your nervous system can handle at this time, maybe you can pause the episode now and come back to it at another time. However, I know how sensitive this topic can be and how emotionally charging it can be. And I experienced that myself, even
Yeah.
through all of the knowledge of nervous system and everything that I have. We're still human beings, and our traumas are our traumas, right? And
Yeah.
so I just wanted to kind of give everyone a little heads up before Tammy gets into her very powerful story. So
Yeah, that's wonderful.
yeah.
You're so comforting and like you are like a
Oh, I love
hug
you.
embodied.
Love
I
you.
love it. I love it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have told this story to friends many times, and I just don't know that it gets any easier.
Right.
And it's interesting because sometimes I'm fully emotional about it, and then other times I'm very just matter of fact about it. Today, I am feeling very emotional, maybe a little bit vulnerable because of the platform. So I'm sure you'll all just kind of bear with me.
Of course.
So, yeah, my story is one of childhood sexual abuse. I don't know exactly when it started, but I know that it was for sure happening when I was 7 until the time I was 12.
Wow.
The abuse happened in my home. And this is the part that's hard to say
Right.
because it's so exposing.
Just take a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take a second. And as you're, creating that, that strength, I do feel like a lot of times it is in a space where, it's least expected with people that anyone would least expect.
Yeah.
And,
That's a really good way to say it.
right.
Yeah. So, that being said, the abuse that happened was at the hand of my father for way too long.
Right.
And, what's interesting, I have specific memories of the events
Right.
that would happen. I would be taken from my bed into his bed. I'm not going to get into the extent
Yes.
of it because
Yeah.
I find that that's quite difficult
Sure.
for me to speak about.
And that's quite personal too.
Yeah, and I, the thing about that I've learned about trauma, because I've done a lot of reading, right? Like a
Yeah.
lot of reading to really understand what was happening to me, and also a lot of reading to feel a little bit more normal,
Right.
right? And not because I want this to happen to other people, but there's things that happen within your body and within your brain when something like that happens to you that you just want answers to,
Absolutely. You
right?
want to figure yourself out. You want to
Yeah.
understand yourself better. Want to understand, how it affected you, and is it affecting the way you're showing up in the world too, right?
Yes.
And I feel like the more awareness we have is where your healing journey actually really begins too, right?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of times when I tell this story, I get people asking questions, which I actually really like,
Yeah, you're open
right?
to
It's
that.
never uncomfortable for me.
Okay.
And so oftentimes the question is, did your mom know?
Right.
And to be honest, at that time, it was a question for myself as well. Like, does my mom know? And is she just letting this go on?
Right.
Right? So growing up for me, an interesting dynamic that happened was I was daddy's girl and teased by my brothers about that. And in my head, even at that young age, I was like, yeah, but you don't know what I have to go through to be that. And growing up, I actually hated my mom
Wow.
because as I believe now, I think I felt very neglected and abandoned.
Right.
Right. We didn't have the relationship where I could go to her and say, this is happening for me.
Like protect you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I feel like
Yeah.
this is a really common thing with trauma, because I think that there's this misconception that trauma is the actual event that occurred, right? But trauma is actually going through that experience and that event alone.
Yeah.
That's where the trauma is. That's where you get traumatized.
Yeah.
And if you have that that resource, that safety, that person, that place, that thing that resources you. Of course, the event is still difficult and it's still very traumatic. However, you're able to move through that trauma. And in being so young, and one of your protectors was your abuser, and the other protector wasn't protecting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think my question to you would be, since you are like such a young age, how did you come to like realizing or knowing that it's something that shouldn't have been happening? Were there messages in your body? Was it something that kind of was like normal and then you realized later that it was something? I'm very curious on just to kind of give, what your little brain was processing at that time.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I knew that it was not
Right from the beginning.
right from the beginning. I also can recall being in grade four. It was grade four. We were in the portables, and there was a conversation being had. We were all sitting, all the kids were sitting on the rug, and the teacher was talking about the inappropriateness of other people touching you in places where they shouldn't have. And I just remember my body feeling very numb.
Right.
Right? Just like it's almost like if you've ever been in a car, like in a near car accident, and then all of a sudden all the blood comes away from your body.
Your survival response.
Yeah. And I remember feeling that and just being in my brain, being like, oh my God, everyone's looking at me. They know it's happening to me.
Wow.
And so I've always known that it was wrong. I was never threatened. My father never said to me, don't tell anybody. But I also knew not to tell anybody. And what's interesting when I can reflect back into that little brain is that I never wanted to tell on my dad because I first never felt there was anyone I could go to.
Right.
I also felt that my dad was very weak, that he was actually the victim because he had to look at himself in the mirror knowing that he was doing this.
Right. Wow.
And I knew
And you're so young
so young.
to even
So
like
young.
think of that.
Who was that little girl?
Right.
Like she was wild.
She was a little girl who was trying to survive her experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And what's wild is that, at nighttime, those things would happen. But then daytime, it was like I expertly compartmentalized exactly what was going on. That was for the nighttime. And during the daytime, I had this beautiful childhood. I was really well liked at school. I did well in school. I had lots of friends. I was very happy-go-lucky. It's wild to me that my little brain was able to compartmentalize like that.
Our brain and body is so wild when it comes to survival.
Yeah.
And the way that our brain rewires itself to just survive these difficult and overwhelming experiences. Like the way that our nervous system shifts, to allow us to get through another day, get through another night, right? And that was like a big thing for you. Like,
Yeah.
and did you find that you kind of like during the day kind of just like, la 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 la, or did you feel
Never
like you
thought
had
about
to
it.
like kind of prepare yourself for what was coming that night? Or like, do you remember feeling in your body when it was like coming bedtime, kind of feeling like anxious or nervous, like I don't want it to be bedtime? Like, did you experience just the way that our body communicates with us is where I really want to get to.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I do want to say about that little girl was that, and this one always is very wild to me. I don't know any other word to use, but like, and I mentioned this to you when we had coffee, was that she knew that this was happening to her for a reason, that this was going to be something that turned into purpose, whether it was talking with other young girls, which happened in grade 6. I was at a sleepover and I shared, not details, but I shared with the girls at the time, my girlfriends, that something was happening.
Right.
And then a few other girls in that moment also expressed the same thing. And one of them even had the courage to go to her mom And when she did that and changed the trajectory of what was happening for her, that really just solidified for my little self that this is happening for a
Wow, that's so
reason.
bizarre that you said that because I had a very similar experience. We went for lunch, a bunch of us girls, myself and my sister and a few other girls, and we were just sitting at the table, nonchalantly just having lunch. And one of the girls, I don't know how this even came up, but one of the girls shared her experience with her sexual abuse. And then from there, everyone kind of stopped. And then you would hear the next person, me too. And I'm going to be I've never shared this before on camera, or actually none of my friends even knew, but I was also a victim of sexual abuse. And at that moment, I remember is when my sister found out, because every single person at that table was like, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. And you know how the Me Too movement
Yes.
started, right?
Yeah.
And my sister was her first time finding out, and that was like a beautiful thing that we shared afterwards, that I got to talk to her about it because it was something that I was holding so deep inside me. And I can really, really resonate with that. Where as soon as one person it took to share their experience at that table,
Yeah.
and the whole table opened up, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted you here.
That's the power of vulnerability. It really just takes one person to let us know that we're safe and we're normal
Yeah.
and these things happen.
Yeah,
And
way
then
too much, way too often. And
way too much, way too often. Now I want to come back
yes,
to, you asked, what does that, like, what would the nighttime feel like? Or
thank you.
like the leading up to the nighttime. And to this day, I'm a terrible sleeper.
And that's just like such a perfect example of how the body keeps the score, how trauma actually lives in our body. We can understand all of our
Yes.
traumas, we can understand the experience intellectually,
Yes.
but the trauma still lives in the body. It's imprinted in our nervous system. There's this deep memory that to this day, you're an adult, you're a mom yourself, you've done a lot of work, you've done a lot of healing, and you continue to. However, your body still remembers that fear
Yeah.
of going to bed at night,
Yeah.
right? And as an adult, for people who maybe don't understand that, it's like, why can't I sleep at night? I have insomnia, and then visits to the doctor and sleep medication. And it's just like, what's that?
Yeah.
Like a domino effect, right?
Yeah. I'll take it one step further for you.
Yeah.
So in a lot of my readings, before I had my babies, it said that sexual abuse survivors can often be triggered when they have children.
Absolutely.
And I was like, no, it's not going to be me. I'm
Yeah.
fine. Look, I can talk about this, no problem. At that time, I had confronted my dad and had received an apology.
We'll
So I
get
was
to that
like,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
we will. I was like, I'm good. Like, I have healed. I am so good. And honestly, having children, it almost, when we were saying at the beginning about your body acclimating, oh my God, it burst open the dam and just was so triggering for me. And further to that, my oldest son, I believe my fears of going to bed, my fears of nighttime have imprinted
Absolutely.
onto his DNA, because he exhibits right from day one, exhibits the exact same fears. He doesn't want to be alone. He doesn't like nighttime.
Yeah.
He has
It's a very anxious time for him.
very anxious time for
Right.
him. And I was like an eagle eye watching anybody with him. I couldn't relax because I wasn't going to let anybody hurt him.
It was almost
Right.
like we needed to become the parent that we needed,
Well, that's exactly what we're doing.
right?
Right? We're trying to protect our own selves
Right.
through our children. They say parents will, live vicariously through their children through sports or something like that. But I think it goes deeper than that
Oh,
when it comes to
absolutely.
trauma. I think that we're trying to heal ourselves through our children. Right. And I think what's well, something that happened to me was I would look at my babies and I would look at my children, and as they would grow up, they're older now, they're 11 and 13. Um, and I would just look at them, and then I would see myself and think, how could somebody do that to somebody
Right.
so innocent? And then I would grieve for my little self who just didn't get to feel that safety.
And I love that you did that because I feel like sometimes when you're faced with those moments, it's so easy to suppress that, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it was kind of like you grieving that your inner child is such a pivotal and healing moment
Yeah.
that there was a lot of healing that took place in that moment that you didn't even realize, right?
Yeah. A lot of my healing came from the kids,
Oh, same.
right?
My healing didn't start till I had the
I couldn't
kids,
agree
right?
more. I couldn't agree more. All the other stuff was kind of like, I don't even
Just
know what
getting
it
by.
was.
I feel
Yeah.
like it was like,
Survival.
I guess, yeah, survival,
Yeah.
gaining some self-awareness,
Yeah.
maybe, validating your traumas and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I feel like for me too, the deep work really started when I had the kids.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what I want to ask you next is, okay, so now you're this little girl who's going through these experiences, and actually, you know what? The first question I want to ask you is, what part of you felt like you needed to protect your dad? Because I feel like this is a really,
So common.
actually, one of the main things in sexual abuse for myself as well, because I didn't tell a soul. And there's so much, I mean, besides the shame and the guilt
Yeah.
and the embarrassment, I guess, behind all of that, which are very, very strong feelings, there's also that need to protect the person, especially when it's a family member,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What part of you felt that, you weren't told not to say anything, you weren't threatened, which is another thing that's very common? What part of you made you feel like you needed to protect him?
Yeah, I think it comes from just viewing my dad as a very weak human,
Wow.
right? I think it's a very weak person that preys on somebody who is not only your daughter, right? Because there's that, and you and I both know that any child will always choose attachment over
Oof,
authenticity,
yes.
right?
Yep.
And I did that for so long and then continued to do that in relationships, continued to accept
Right.
less than because I needed and wanted attachment. But I looked at my dad just as a very weak man, and I knew he would never make it in jail. I also viewed my mom as a very weak woman. I'm not really sure why I
Maybe
came
because
to
she didn't
that.
protect you.
Maybe because she didn't protect me. My mom, in all fairness, was going through her own stuff, which is something that I started to learn just a few years ago. What the relationship dynamic was like there. I came to learn that my dad was a controlling narcissist
Yeah.
who was extremely emotionally abusive to her. He was extremely physically abusive to one of my brothers, which I had no idea of.
Right. Yes, I
This was all
remember
stuff
talking
that,
about
yeah,
this.
I learned as I got older about who my dad actually was, because quite frankly, growing up, I thought I was the only person. However, that being said, in the back of my mind, I wondered where where did he learn this?
Yes.
Right? It
Yep.
must it
Where
must
did
have
this come
happened to
from?
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like who would ever think to do something like this?
Right.
And so I protected him because I thought he was weak. I didn't believe my mom could carry us as a family. So I thought, but little did I know was my mom was working 3 jobs and my dad
Right.
wasn't working at
But
all.
you see the perception
Yes.
that you were coming from at such a young age. So
Yeah.
staying silent also
Yeah.
meant staying safe and
Safe.
stable.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's go to how and when did it stop?
Yeah. So I actually will probably carry that memory forever.
Yeah.
That very visual, that is
Ingrained in your
just so
brain.
ingrained. I was 12 years old. I was in my parents' bedroom. My mom, I don't know where the hell she was. And my father was trying to get me to do something.
Yeah.
And I just literally said no. And he stopped and he started to cry. And he said he was so sorry. he said that my mom just wasn't a wife for him, or some type of gist of that
Wow.
story.
My
And I just
goodness.
remember thinking to myself, this is not my job. This
Right.
is not my job.
And you're 12.
And I was 12. Then I was 12. And then I went back to my room and it never happened again.
Wow.
So that is powerful in some in itself. But there was also a lot for me around that when I reflect back,
Right.
that why didn't I say no earlier? I know what my head was thinking. I was going to be the aggressor when it came to sex because it was my choice
And you were in control.
and I was in control.
Like you call the shots.
I was the one that was going to say this was going to happen. Yes, definitely. And I was also searching for love through my body, 'cause that's
Connection.
the only way
Yeah.
that I knew, right? So when that happens to you at a young age in those formative years, what ends up happening is that your brain is actually rewired
Yeah.
to just be in survival. And
Right.
so what I learned that love was you give over your body
Mhm.
and then you'll get love. And so that is why I was promiscuous. That is why I was unfaithful in relationships. And I just had zero worth. I also did not know how to say no to anything.
Same.
Anything.
Yeah.
My first sexual experience, unfortunately, was rape.
Wow.
So the first time that I was, intimate with a boy that was somewhat my age, who was a little bit older, was rape. And then in my 20s, it happened again.
Have you come to that part of your journey where you, I guess, forgave whatever that definition means to you, forgave your dad for all of the trauma that you experienced growing up? And if so, how does that look? And if not, how does
Yeah.
that look?
That's a really good question. I said to him intellectually, because I had read that forgiveness was important. I forgive you.
Okay.
I don't forgive him.
No.
I don't think that I could ever forgive somebody for doing the things that he did and changing the trajectory of everything that happened in my life for his own selfish needs, regardless of the fact that I believe in soul contracts or
Right.
anything like that. I personally, at this stage, don't believe I need to forgive him for anything.
I love that.
However, I have forgiven myself.
Yes.
I had a lot of behaviors growing up that I have come to really understand where they all came from. I used to judge myself so much
course.
for the things that I did. I still carry around a lot of guilt, as much as I have tried very, very hard to forgive myself. But I'm doing a lot better in terms of forgiving myself.
Right. And I feel like that takes time. That's baby steps,
think
right? You
that's
have
gonna
to
be
do that
forever.
over and over because this is, imagine years and years of shame and guilt and
Yeah.
criticizing yourself. And it's kind of like breaking down those barriers to, start a new relationship with yourself.
Yes.
And it's like when
Yeah.
somebody betrays you and you do choose to forgive them, it takes time to build that trust again. It takes time to rebuild that relationship again. And that's the same thing with the relationship with ourselves. When we've spent so much time and so many years hating ourselves and criticizing ourselves, it's kind of like letting those parts slowly go with your time
Yeah.
and rebuilding a new relationship with yourself and how you view yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's so powerful that you brought that up because I do feel like when people are on a healing journey, it's this big thing where you have to forgive. Forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. But that it's bullshit. It's
100%.
you can't just intellectually say that and feel that in your body.
No
And
way.
that's a part of the journey.
Yes.
You can see for me, and I have another episode where I'm going to be talking about this, where what forgiveness means to you. And the definition of what forgiveness means to you is where you work with
Yeah.
your forgiveness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that there was a big part of you that kind of not forgive, but understood why he showed up the way
Yes.
that he did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, and I'll try to keep this brief, back in 2021, some occurrences happened in my life, and someone came to me within my family and said that they too had been sexually abused. And what was interesting about that revelation was that a year previous, I was sitting with this person who is part of my family, my extended family, and I had told her what had happened to me. I'd never told her before, and here I am, a grown adult woman,
Right.
sharing with her. And a year later, she comes to me and says, the same thing happened to me. And I got an instant download from source, universe, God, whoever you call it, that said, are you ready? And this was the moment that I had waited for my whole life.
Wow. I've
And
got
that,
goosebumps.
oh, it was weeks of going to my extended family, going to my mom, going to my brothers, and telling everyone
What had
what
happened?
happened. I didn't have to keep it inside, and it was the hardest thing that I had ever done, harder than sitting here in a
Absolutely.
public thing, was to face my father's family and say what he had done. And unfortunately, from that, which was very healing for me, but unfortunately, from that, what I did come to learn was that I was not an isolated event within my family, and that there had been other occurrences generationally of sexual abuse
Within your family
within
dynamic.
my family.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for the little girl who grew up thinking it must be just me,
Right.
but who had that inkling of, "Well, where did he learn this from?" Now, he's never said to me
Yes, of
anything
course.
has happened. Him and I obviously
You don't
no
have a
longer have a
relationship. Okay.
relationship at all. Obviously, if I called him, he would take my
Of
call.
course.
But for me, it's just not a relationship that I'm willing to work
No,
on
and that
whatsoever.
doesn't mean that you're not going any. I remember when I was going through my healing journey, there's different steps to forgiveness. And the last step is your choice. And whether if you want to continue to have a relationship with this person
Yeah.
or rebuild your relationship with this person. And either one of those choices
Yeah.
is still a part of your healing journey. Just because you're not forgiving them and accepting them does not mean that you're not on your healing journey.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Tammy,
absolutely.
take us through how all of these experiences brought you to who you are today, what you're doing today, and how you've learned to bring yourself through this healing journey, and maybe some things that you've used to kind of help you with that.
Yeah. I think, like I said in the beginning, it's really been a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
And I think it will continue.
Forever.
I think that was supposed to happen to me. I think that was a contract that I had with my dad, that these awful things would happen. And then I would use those awful things to move forward in my life. Now I'm a realtor by trade.
Okay.
I'm also an online network marketer.
Okay.
And one of the important traits of somebody who's in those careers is relationships. And for me, I've always been told, and I quite enjoy it, that I'm easy to speak with. I'm
You
easy to
definitely
talk
are.
to.
Yeah.
And I've had people lay things out for me and tell me their own traumas without me even saying anything. And for me, that's such an honor. I feel like that's part of my purpose here. And so it's also made me, in my opinion, a good parent.
Absolutely.
I have a very open and good relationship with my boys. And I want to make sure that I am someone they can always come to, because things are going to happen.
Exactly.
We can try to control everything, right? Like as we do as
Yeah.
moms. But the reality is things are going to happen, whether they're going to be in situations that are not good for them, or, something might happen to them, God forbid, because I will be in jail. However,
Me and you both.
right? But I think it's made me a much more aware parent. And it's empowered my children. And we talked about this
Yes, we have.
at the coffee shop, where I used to say that I was the generation breaker,
Yes. Oh, this stuck with me, by the
but
way.
I'm not.
You're not.
I'm the catalyst,
Right.
because it's not happening to my children.
That's right.
Right. So because I chose to say stop, they're breaking the actual generational curse that we've got on our family.
That's stuck with me ever since you've said it. It's
Yeah.
something that always comes to my mind, and it's giving me a whole new perspective on so many different things.
Yeah, I think it allows, I know that it allows the way that I have been and shown up as a parent empowers my children to have an actual voice
Right.
when I didn't.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, Tammy. So I know that at first I want you to share where people can find you. I know that you also have some tools and resources that you use for yourself
Yes, of course.
to regulate your nervous system,
Yeah.
to lower cortisol. So I want you to share where people can find you and
Yeah.
Instagram handles, website,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you can find me. My website is tammykeating.com. You're absolutely right. I almost forgot.
Yes.
Part of a huge part, in my opinion, of the shift of my nervous system,
Right.
because that was the piece that was missing for
Yeah.
me. I wasn't willing to go deeper a couple of years ago by way of breath work,
Right.
and things like that. But a shift happened so beautifully when I started taking these supplements
Right.
that they are strain specific, mental wellness, gut healing supplements that actually help your nervous system to calm down.
Well, your nervous system is the key to your healing,
Oof,
right? And
big
your
time.
brain and
Yes.
your gut and your nervous
Yes.
system, it's all connected.
100%.
So that's so powerful. And
Yeah.
what is your Instagram handle?
So I'm at Tammy after 45.
It's Tammy after
Yeah,
45.
absolutely.
Beautiful. And of course, you can find me on Instagram at This Is Healing Official and on my website at www.thisishealing.ca. Tammy, thank you so much for being here. I know that this episode is going to open a whole other world for people. And with that being said, if there is somebody who's listening or watching this episode and there are really big things that come up for you, I welcome you to reach out. I will be more than happy to support you working through this heaviness that comes with stories like this. However, it is so important and so powerful for us to be vulnerable, to
100%.
share our stories, and to allow us to open up maybe somebody's beginning
Yeah.
of their healing journey as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. I know I'm going to have you back on again. There's still so many more things that we need to talk about, and I loved having you here. Thank you. You're so powerful.
Thanks for having me. Thanks
course.
for this platform.
Of course.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I'm going to hug you.